Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our final installment of the specialization webinar with the program heads from the various centers. Today, we're going to be speaking to Ryan Cavente from the Sustainability Specialization. And before we get started, I just want to introduce myself in case you haven't had a chance to speak with me yet. My name is Tristan Norbert. I'm a graduate recruiter for the Lundquist School of Business. And also joining us today is Justine Cruz, who is currently a second-year student in the Oregon MBA with the Sustainability Specialization. So today is dedicated to kind of ask Ryan various questions about the sustainability focus in that particular program. So I have a series of questions that I'll work through, but I would also like to invite anybody to ask questions throughout the session as well. Justine will be monitoring the chat, so you can certainly type in questions there. And then we might have a little bit of time at the end if you would like to turn off your mic and ask a question, we'd be happy to do so as well. So again, thank you for joining us. We understand, it's a Monday and a busy, if you're busy wherever you are. So we really appreciate you having the opportunity to join us for this time being. So that being said, let me stop talking and introduce our special guest, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us today. So if you'd like to get us started and just share a little bit about your background, that would be great.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Just to introduce myself, I'm Ryan Cavente. I'm the Director of Sustainability Programs at the Lundquist College of Business. And part of that is to be Program Manager of the Center for Sustainable Business Practices, which is the center that kind of administrates the sustainability specialization in the MBA program. We can get into more about that in a moment, but just by way of background, I've been in and around business schools for about 10 years. For the first 6 years of that, I worked at a place called Presidio Graduate School, which is in MBA speak is a challenger brand to sort of the incumbent business programs that are out there. It's a small school that's just focused on sustainability and business, sustainability business and policy, I guess now as well. But spent 6 years there, got up to a dean role there, and then moved to University of Oregon because I wanted to have the opportunity to work for a flagship state MBA program. And so U of O is a really, really great place to do that. U of O has a really nice leadership position in sustainability and business, especially in its MBA program. So I wanted to be a part of that. Before that, I was a lawyer. I'm glad not to be doing that anymore, but I did a lot of corporate litigation, corporate consulting, both defending corporations from things like environmental lawsuits, but also suing them quite a bit. Turns out you can make a lot of money doing that. So I did that. That was sort of my first career, and decided that acrimony as a professional skill was not something I wanted to continue doing with my life. So that's why I went looking for what I now know is called the business case for sustainability. And I really enjoy what I do here because I get to be in touch with so many awesome ideas for especially entrepreneurship and innovation in the sustainability space. And so I help you find those careers in those spaces. And Tristan also asked me for a fun fact. And my go-to fun fact is that I'm an identical twin. So one of these days, I hope to bring him to the school and fool all the students and see if they can tell a difference. But that's my fun fact. So is that enough of an introduction, Tristan?
Yeah, that's great, Ryan. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm so curious to know if you've ever done like the switch in like a lecture or something like that.
No, never have. But there's always time.
Always time. Yeah, and so you touched on this a little bit, but if you could just talk to us a little bit about like what is the Center for Sustainable Practices and like what is the function of the center?
Yeah, there's a bunch of things, but I think the two most relevant are in two big buckets. One is sort of driving curriculum, that is sort of classwork and class substance, and then the other is developing co-curricular programs, so things that you would do outside of class or in sort of adjunct to class that develop your professional skills in ways that aren't straight curriculum. So one, on the curricular side, so I administrate and help to find faculty and help to shape curriculum in the specialization. So I look at, what the core courses are, suggest changes, try to execute on those changes. For example, we took out our supply chain course and put in a course called Life Cycle Assessment for our specialization, because we thought that was a little bit more relevant to the core. We're always trying to develop new electives and other things for the specialization. So we really help the school tend to its subject matter expertise in the classroom. Another big part of that, I guess I would mention, is that the center right now has been tasked to design new required core courses for all MBAs in sustainable business practices. So in the past, we've only been sort of tending to the specialization, but now the school has decided, as a matter of just the direction that business is going, that all MBAs will have to have classes in sustainable business practices. So on the curricular side, we're designing those classes for the school. So that's one function of what we do. And on the co-curricular side, which has actually been a lion's share of what the center has done, is we try to support you with essentially a jungle gym of professional development opportunities. So that includes networking opportunities, both bringing guest speakers into the program in your seminar, but also taking you on trips, pre-COVID anyway, to Seattle and Portland and San Francisco to see dozens and dozens and dozens of different companies in their own context, so that you can get to see, not just obviously in a virtual way or on paper, but actually what the actual corporate environments look like, what the actual manufacturing environments look like. And if we are lucky enough, we usually take also a trip in September to Asia. And the last trip we took, just to give you an example of kind of the things that we do, we went to Shanghai, Ho Chi Minh City, and Bangkok, which gave us the ability to both go to sort of the high-powered, super quickly growing corporate context in Shanghai that's sort of generating all of the activity in the region, but we also got to go see Nike factories or Patagonia factories, or the kinds of business contexts that exist in Southeast Asia, in the other cities I mentioned. And so hopefully those all relate to sustainability in a way that helps you, obviously gain exposure to things you otherwise might not have had exposure to had you not gone through the program. So there's that. We also do consulting projects. We call them strategic planning projects. Those are sort of a hybrid curricular and co-curricular activity, because you do get course credit for it in the specialization. But we consult from small companies to big companies. Columbia Sportswear. We worked for a mining company last year. We worked for companies that are way out on the edge of sustainability, like B Lab. We help them sort of figure out some of their stakeholder engagement strategy for benefit corporations. Everything from startups to all kinds of different companies, and we try to tailor them as best we can to your interests, depending on what we have in our network. We support you in case competitions. We have a fund that helps you to go to conferences that you might not otherwise have heard of or been able to go to. We're constantly putting you in contact with people that we just happen to know through emails. So the more you interact with me, the more I can connect you with people who are coming across my transom, wanting to interact with you, OBO students, and do that on a one-on-one or a la carte basis. And then I'm available, and a couple of other us are available simply as mentors for you to drop in, talk through. Hey, I heard about this thing called carbon capture through rain falling on rocks, and you have somebody here to talk through about that, to kind of figure out, is that a real thing? Is there anybody you should talk to? Is there anything you should read? How do I get a career in that? Those sorts of things. So as I say, what we try to do is provide you with a jungle gym of things that you can kind of climb around on and sort of make your way towards success and satisfaction in your career in the space of sustainability in business. That's the overview.
Good. I think you touched on it quite a bit in depth, but is there anything else that you would want to add in terms of how does the center engage with students at the graduate level?
Yeah, I guess it helps to, maybe Justine can talk to her experience in terms of at least last year, which was all virtual. So it can be kind of difficult to know in my seat how students are are experiencing it. But in your first year, if you're in the specialization, your main touch point with the specialization will be a seminar, which is a class that happens for about an hour and a half once a week on Thursdays. It'll be the last thing that you do in the academic week. And that will usually feature a speaker, but then also some time for all of you to get to know each other and talk about what informational interviews you might be working on or what kinds of projects you are working on, so that you can kind of share what's happening. It also ends up being sort of a control center for information. So we have other speakers coming, or if we have trips coming down the pike, or people are interested in gathering a group for a case competition team, then the seminar is really sort of a home base for you to meet that way. That's also the home base for the trips. And so when we are doing them in the context of seminar, we will be sort of getting ready for trips and reading the right things and thinking about the right things. And then the other major touch point, I think, in terms of how the center interacts is the consulting program. So in your second year, during the second and third terms, I guess you should call them the winter and spring terms, January to June, you are working on your capstone consulting project, your strategic planning project. And that's the other sort of big contact point with this center. That's sort of, yeah, I guess I'll stop there. Obviously, you have your classes that we have programmed for you, and there are faculty there who are closely associated with the center. And so they will be a big part of your experience here too.
So my next question, and forgive me if it's an obvious question, but I guess, could you just tell us, what is sustainable business?
Sure. Well, sustainable business, according to me, is business that contributes to sustainable development. Well, what does that mean? Sustainable development is development that helps people meet their needs today without impairing the ability of people in the future to do the same. And one of the things in the future that's going to prevent people from actually having decent standards of living is the fact that we're eating up the ecological carrying capacity of the earth. When I was born, there's about 4 billion people, and today there's about 8 billion people. So that's creating incredible pressures on the physical carrying capacity of the earth. We solve some of that through technology, but as you probably know, since you're in this session, our ability to do that through technology, at least through the social systems that we currently have, are being taxed. And so sustainable business sort of says, well, what are the drivers of real value in a world where natural capital is increasingly scarce compared to human capital? And it turns out that if you apply business tools, the ideas of change management and strategy, and asset management and entrepreneurship and innovation, you actually can do quite a bit to alleviate some of these very large challenges profitably. And so that's what the practice of sustainable business is. That's not to say that we figured out how to solve all of these things. Clearly we haven't, but business is an interesting thing to try alongside everything else that we're doing in order to, as I say, solve some of these very, very large challenges for which there's now terrific evidence that we can't afford not to solve. So that's the general practice of what we're trying to do. I can get into many more specifics, but you can sort of intuit from what I just said what the implications might be for that in finance or in supply chain or in marketing and interacting with customers, or in any of the other sort of business disciplines.
So my follow-up from that is, why would someone choose to do an MBA specialization in sustainable business practices?
There's a lot of different reasons. One big one is that sustainability is going to be increasingly central to the practice of management and leadership over the next 40 or 50 years, just because of the pressures that I just talked about. But another big reason, I think, is, whether you're a tree-hugging hippie or a profit-maximizing capitalist, there's going to be a lot of opportunity in this space. And so I think a lot of students simply want to know what's going on. What is going on in energy? What is a carbon credit and an offset? And can you make any money doing that? What are the new materials that will solve some of the packaging issues, packaging waste issues that all consumers now really, really hate. What can be done? What kinds of things need to be developed? And am I somebody who, through business, can sort of solve some of these issues, or at least find a nice, sort of satisfying career at the intersection of sustainability and business? That's another really big reason. And then we have a lot of students who have quite a bit of experience, but they're simply dissatisfied with what they do because their work doesn't have very much meaning to them. They're very good at what they do. They've been doing it for a while, but they don't get to call the shots, and they certainly don't get to call make the strategic decisions about where the company is going. And sustainability is a really, really good lens to help you sort of be a future-oriented, more senior leader in business organizations. So those would be three really big reasons. I think a fourth, I guess, is if you're just really enthusiastic about one of the verticals that's associated with our field. I mean, if you really want smart, clean food and are frustrated at your choices, maybe you want to do that. If you really are interested in apparel but are worried about how much waste the clothing industry, the fashion industry creates. If you are really interested in the world of renewable energy and want to know more about, what makes a financial pro forma go for utility scale solar, that would be another reason why you do our specialization as opposed to some other specialization.
Great, thanks. Ryan, could you talk to us a little bit about the classes that students will take in the program, and is there a more popular class that students are always itching to take?
Yeah, so the classes that you would take, there's basically 5 required courses. One is the seminar, which is basically a practitioner guest sort of speaker series. That's sort of your entry level course. And then at the end, there's the strategic planning project, which is the consulting capstone. Those are the 2 anchors, sort of alpha and omega. In between, you'll take 3 courses that are required. One is sustainable business development. That is sort of your 101 or your survey course. And then there is the very popular next course in the specialization, which is industrial ecology. And so that gets a lot into the actual applied aspects of things like carbon accounting and paper versus plastic. And what do consumers really know, and what is their potential, but what do they really know about sustainability, and what is their potential to drive sustainable change in a way that helps businesses actually make more money that way. So that's like sort of the advanced class. And then the third class, as I was mentioning, that's required in terms of like regular coursework, is life cycle assessment. And that is the science of industrial ecology. So from extraction to manufacturing, to distribution, to retail use and end of life, what are all of the impacts that are created through that entire circular cycle, and what can we do along the way to measure and manage those impacts so that we get better sustainability outcomes than we would have in the past. So you'll learn about, as I say, carbon accounting and scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and how do we deal with those things, and really the nitty-gritty of managing your supply chains. Those are the basic courses that you would take in the specialization, and then you have 2 or 3 electives. Impact investing is available, clean energy finance is available. Justine, maybe you can help me with some of the other electives that people tend to take. Business of food, if it's available. There's the greening of sports class, and all of them are there's an impact investing course. They're all very popular, but I think it really just depends on what you're really interested in, which ones you take. But the 2 ones that I think are most popular are the required courses: life cycle assessment and industrial ecology. So it's convenient actually that they're required and not elective, because those tend to be where the real meat of the program are.
Ryan, you pretty much hit on them, but I'll just add, one of the classes that I'm taking this term is soil science. And so because of our electives, we're able to take graduate courses outside of the business school to fill in our learning. And so I'm taking that in the environmental school. And I know, I think some classmates of mine are taking a climate change course. And like, if you were interested in GIS, you could certainly do stuff like that. So I'll say that's what's awesome, is the flexibility of your courses once you get into the electives.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to look outside of the business school for courses that you can use as electives in the sustainability specialization. And sustainability is inherently interdisciplinary and intersectoral. So there's lots of things that you can look at. We actually have quite a few students taking classes in the journalism school, in a marketing school, things like storytelling or customer insights, and all of those sorts of things, which can be very, very complementary to your specialization.
Terrific. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Justine. Just a reminder, if anybody does have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. But I'll kind of keep chugging along here on our questions that we have. So I'm curious to know. Oh, we actually do have a question. How many classes / credits per term do people typically take, and how many terms to graduate?
It will generally be 4 or 5 classes per term, especially in the first year. Although it seems to me that a lot of students get ahead of the average that they need, and so maybe in the last part of the program they're really just taking 3 or 4 as opposed to 4 or 5. Justine, you can back me up on that or contradict me. And it's usually 6 terms. And so 2 years. You split the summer is also a term, but you usually don't take classes during the term. So it's usually a fall term, a winter term, and a spring term, for a total of 6 terms. And you usually do an internship in the summer. I don't know if that was a muddy answer, but it's a 2-year program.
Thanks, Kristen. I hope that helps answer your question. If you want to follow up, feel free to let us know. So Ryan, I'm curious, what resources are available through the specialization and the center that helps students differentiate themselves in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think I went through most of them. I think it's really incumbent on you to use the interaction with the network, with the companies, your exposure to guest speakers, your consulting projects, to use those as the basis of your foundation for your differentiation. That is, the way you develop your own understanding of business intelligence and your place in the world amid that business intelligence is by networking and developing your theory that way. So come in and talk to me, I'll coach you through that. What are you really interested in? Who are you really? How do you set yourself up to have really good informational interviews? How do you go above and beyond the simple consulting relationship that you've been set up with in your class to actually develop a personal relationship with the people who you're doing the work for, so that in the future you can call upon them for recommendations or all of that sort of advice. The resources really are, sort of all there holistically to give you opportunities to develop what your differentiation is. It's not something that comes from, oh, I took this specific class. Oh, I took, I did this specific thing. It's really you finding your way through and trying to figure out how you use this program to get where you're going. It's a little bit different, I think, than some other specializations, let's say in finance, where you really are getting on I mean this in the best possible way, that you're sort of getting on a conveyor belt and you're going right into a very clear hierarchical kind of profession, and there's a really clear path where you're going. Specialization is the exact opposite. It's more broad than you can handle. And so we don't train people, let's say, specifically to do global reporting initiative sustainability reports, or we don't train people to specifically go into ESG and understand how to deal with sort of the labor metrics, although you can get that out of our program. What we really do is provide you a context to be able to go in any particular direction. So the differentiation is your contact with our network and your ability to use that network to get where you want to go. Duck Nation is very large. And so, you know, that's really what differentiates sort of our students, is their ability to tap on the network that's available to them. I know that's not the sort of the usual sort of direct answer to that question, but that really is, I think, more accurate in terms of what we do. Would you say that's true, Justine?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'll add one more point, is that our club here, the Graduate Net Impact Chapter, I feel like that really gave me like a good stepping stone to get involved in consulting projects my first year. And so what's cool is, like, now coming around to my second year, I'm one of the leadership heads in the club. And so we are now providing leadership consulting opportunities for first years and also second years if they want some more opportunity to really carve out the industry or carve out the expertise that they're looking to gain. And I can just speak from last year, we worked with a nonprofit called Carbon Group, and they put us in contact with different nonprofits who needed help with business proposals. So we did a market plan for a clean water project in Senegal, Africa. And so that was cool to just like, we had literally had like no direction, and it felt very realistic of like, how are we going to start this? And you collaborate with your classmates to figure out like, how are you going to create a market plan and what population are you going to target? And this year, we're working with a local tea company. And so what's Young Mountain Tea, if you guys are curious. So we're actually helping out with their sales strategy. And then another project is helping out with Bring certification, which is a sustainability certification. And those are both very practical and hands-on that you may not necessarily get the chance to work on in a classroom setting. So certainly you can make it what you want.
Yeah, Justine's reminding me that, you know, maybe it's better to kind of explain by example. So just to be concrete about the process that I'm talking about, two speakers that we brought into our seminar that students had contact with, they were bringing them in as guest speakers was a goal in and of itself, because they're really interested in companies. I'll type their names, or at least their websites, into the chat so you can see them. One is called Nori.com, and the other one is Edo Energy. And I mentioned those two. So Nori is a really exciting company. It's probably not one that you would have heard of coming into the program, but what they do is blockchain-based carbon offset programs that are developed through sustainable or regenerative agriculture programs by farmers. So I know that's sort of a buzzword soup there, but you can look at the website and see what exactly that means. But the point is, we brought them in to speak to our students, and a couple of them were interested in working for Nori. They mentioned that they were hiring, and it turns out that they actually did hire one of our students because they pursued it. And their differentiator was that they were associated with University of Oregon, and they, you know, Nori knew University of Oregon, and they were able to present the skills that were needed. So, you know, that's one example. And then similarly, Edo Energy is actually a company now they've been through a Series B funding round, I think so far. They're about $10 million raised. But what they do is they turn physical real estate projects, so buildings, into energy grid assets. So not just an energy off-taker from the grid, but also a power source, a power storage source, and a source of intelligence of use for the grid, so that it's you know, instead of a smart meter, you have a whole smart building. That's what they do. And they spun out of McKinstry, which was our alums' former employer. But I mentioned them again because we brought them in to talk to students, and now they are employing more of our students as a result of that contact. So that's what I mean by sort of a jungle gym, is we put things in front of you, and if you can take advantage of them, there are real opportunities for you to do that.
Great. So just following up with that, Ryan, oftentimes I get students asking, you know, they're looking to make a career pivot, and we're sometimes talking about their past experiences and how it's going to translate to the sustainable business world. So I guess my question is like, what type of pre-MBA work experience lends itself well for a successful post-MBA career?
In our specialization?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is, as I've said, sustainability is very, very broad. And so there's just a lot of ways in which you can sort of transfer your skills. The people who have the easiest time optimizing their money-making ability are people with technical backgrounds. So people who have maybe an engineering background, or maybe a bench scientist background, or maybe even environmental science, some sort of material science background, and they come in and combine that with a specialization in sustainable business practices. It's very easy for companies to see how they might be used in a business context, whether in supply chain management and procurement kinds of decisions, or simply the numeracy and facility with quantitative analysis makes them more attractive, even if they're going to go into a finance sort of type position. So that's one sort of easy answer. But more generally, I think that because sustainability itself is so broad, it's very easy to create a narrative about what transfers from your background in the past. We have a lot, more than other specializations, more than MBAs in general, we have a much more diverse set of backgrounds. We have people who are coming from the NGO space. For example, about a third of our students come from some sort of mission-driven or impact-driven organization, whether within the private sector or not. And they tend to do very well if they've got, let's say, a business development background or a fundraising background. They tend to do very well in terms of moving into sort of a marketing space or more into a strategy space. So the good news is it doesn't take any particular kind of background, but it does take somebody who is very clear on what they want to do. Dabblers and dilettantes can get kind of lost in the number of options that there are within sustainability. And so the work you really need to do is, have a clear picture of what you want to, use as your sort of experience platform, and how that might translate into what you want to do going forward. But it's not as if, you needed to be pre-med or something.
You mentioned earlier internships, and so I'll just dive a little bit deeper into that. What types of internships and summer experiences do students in your specialization typically pursue?
Yeah, Justine, do you want to talk about your summer?
Yeah, I worked for Amy's Kitchen this summer, and that actually teed up nicely from the life cycle assessment class I did. So in the life cycle assessment class, you are paired with a actual business who needs to evaluate a product. And I actually chose Amy's Kitchen and because I want to go into the food sector. So I've been trying to really rebrand my profile and gain experience in the food sector. So that worked out nicely, because when they had an opening for the summer, she emailed our team because we had just done a life cycle assessment against their plant-based protein versus the meat-based protein on the market. And so they had like over 120 applicants, and I ended up getting the role, which was great because she had seen part of my work from the relationship that we had. And so the work I did for her this summer, I worked on their sustainability team, and it's a small team of 3, but what's cool is each of them had different expertise along the supply chain of sustainability. So I worked on communications and trying to figure out how do we communicate their sustainability practices to their key retailers. So whether that's your grocery stores, or if it's looking at potential partners like university partners. So understanding the target audience and what to communicate, but also helping pretty much train their sustainability team their sales team on how to communicate that, because there's often a disconnect between sustainability in a business and all the other departments. So I was trying to create material that can easily circulate. And then a second project that I did with them was doing a mini carbon accounting project on organic dairy versus conventional dairy. So it had like a little bit of quant and then a little bit of communications and like team building. And so that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I mean, you know, connected to your question, Tristan, before about why people would want to do the specialization. I mean, these days there is no shortage of internships where companies are trying to figure out what to do about sustainability. So, you know, we have people doing ESG or, you know, sort of finance related internships. So if you want to go work, I'm not sure we haven't placed anybody that I know of in sort of a Goldman Sachs, but, you know, there's plenty of BlackRock right now is making a lot of noise in ESG and impact investing, and they have a lot of opportunities there. So, you know, that's an area that you can go into. We have a lot of people who do energy related internships. So we actually place a lot of our students, or every year we place a student in the Environmental Defense Fund Climate Corps program, which is sort of a high prestige, high brand recognition program, where essentially Environmental Defense Fund has all of these relationships with Fortune 500 companies that have carbon related projects or climate related projects, and they run this sort of highly selective process to find MBAs who can work on these projects. And so we routinely place people in those. But again, I think it really depends on knowing yourself and knowing what you want to do, because a lot of people, I think, you know, their eyes will get big at the sort of the Nikes and Patagonias of the world. And we send students to those sort of really well-known companies, especially if they're retail focused. But we do send quite a bit of students to companies that no one's ever heard of, because a lot of the really exciting things that are going on are in small and medium-sized enterprises, especially at the startup phase. I mean, like Edo and like Nori, where we had students doing internships there because we came in contact with them, and they're doing all kinds of projects. I think Nori's biggest need right now is business development, and is selling their carbon offsets to corporate sustainability programs. They don't have any trouble generating the credits. They don't have any trouble sort of having a process to verify them. But they're on the demand side. They have a lot of needs. So you won't necessarily be doing, you know, sustainability projects. It's good old fashioned business that these companies have needs for. Edo, I think, was more of a data analysis project. So Edo, as you can imagine, is much more data driven. They're a smart grid technology, and so they have a lot of need for finding the data that's being thrown off by all these interactions with buildings, but then also analyzing what to do with it.
Great, thanks. We probably have time for just one or two more questions, but I also want to make sure that if anybody's out there has any questions, you have the ability to ask them as well. So, so my next question, Ryan, is why Eugene? Why is Eugene a great place to study sustainable business practices?
Eugene physically? Eugene's just beautiful. I mean, that's the reason to come to Eugene. I came from the Bay Area, and you know, here everything is 15 minutes away at the most. You can go out and run forever and get to nature really, really quickly. You can get on your bike and move around, and you're very close to Portland. So that's another key reason, I think, to be in Eugene. And you know, I think to a greater degree than is true in a lot of other places, I think sustainability and sustainable business is much more in the culture in Oregon than other places. And so there are lots of, especially small and local businesses like Cafe Yum and Market of Choice, our big sort of local supermarket chain that we're all proud of. You know, lots of businesses that you can come into contact with, especially, as you might imagine, in Oregon, you know, having to do with food and agriculture. You know, if you're interested in wine, and you know, we've had students launch a lot of alcohol related businesses that are in fact sustainable. You know, that's another reason, I think, to be in Eugene as opposed to another place, is that, you know, I think the culture is a lot more compatible with, you know, what is sustainable business, and trying to figure that out than a lot of other places.
Thanks. So just two more questions. Could you share with us, what are a few alumni success stories?
Sure. So one, I mentioned, I can't remember, I think I mentioned Columbia Sportswear. So their global head of environmental management is one of our alums. Guru Larson, if you want to look up her profile, I think she's one of the 40 under 40 or 30 under 30 that Lundquist just declared from our own alumni. So Guru Larson is one. Another is actually Stacia Bentley, who's working for Amy's Kitchen. Justine, did you work with her directly?
Yeah, that was who I worked for this past summer. So she's on Green Biz's 30 under 30. And Alyssa worked for Yogi, who Brianna's on that list as well.
Yeah, so Brianna, I'm blanking on her name.
Taylor, I believe.
I don't think it's Brianna. Brianna Buckles.
Buckles, okay.
Buckles, yeah. Both Brianna Buckles and Stacia Bentley were declared 30 under 30 by greenbiz.org. I don't know if you know who they are, but they're sort of the paper of record for sustainable business. So they would be two sort of success stories, and both of them are working on very, very hardcore technical supply chain strategy, especially around carbon, trying to really nail what their measurement, what their impact is, and how to reduce that impact. So those were the three examples I think that would really count as success stories.
Great, thanks. And then my closing question for you is, what advice do you offer for a prospective student considering your specialization?
Yeah, I think the main one, the biggest piece of advice I tend to give a lot is start your networking now. Start talking to people who can help you generate your own understanding of what sustainable business is and what you want to do, because it can be so broad that you really get lost in the options, as I mentioned before. And so the more intelligence you have about where the world is going at the intersection of sustainability and business, the more you can actually use our program to generate value for yourself. The folks who have a little bit harder time, I think, are the ones who they never really come up with a strong theory on why they're in school. I mean, this is true for MBAs in general and people going to graduate school in general, but I think for sustainability in particular, it's important. What is it exactly that you want to do, and how are you going to use the resources we provide to you in order to be successful? And the best way to do that is not to spend 6 hours on the internet and think you've done a lot of research by looking at a lot of websites. You really need to talk to people, practitioners, who are actually doing the work. And so getting used to having the skill of asking people that you don't necessarily know if they want to go out for coffee. But really generating your own ability to get to know yourself in the context of the field by doing informational interviews is something you should start right away. Because that process will serve you forever, and they certainly will serve you while you're in school.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. We really appreciate your time.